It is for me an honor, but also a great opportunity to have this possibility of sharing with you how we see the challenge. GWP is very happy to be convening and helping in organizing this particular session, as we see that this is one of the key issues we have to solve, and we need to change the scale of how we do finance for resiliency. So let me very briefly tell you that GWP is a global organization. As you know, we are present in over 170 countries, and we have more than 3,500 organizations that are members of our network. And what we are really doing is convening key stakeholders to move into action. So I want to share with you two sets of reflections and knowledge on what we are doing in Africa and in the Mediterranean. Let's start with Africa. Africa is, as we all know, a priority for all of us, and it is certainly a priority for GWP. And climate resilience is one of the main issues where the continent is facing unbelievable challenges. The only way to solve those challenges is going to be by increasing the investment, and also by doing that in a clever fashion. And our work in that regard is to be able to play a role of reaching out to the main stakeholders and also mobilizing that financing from governments, multilaterals, and even the private sector. Our main program is the African Investment Program, AIP. And it is a very ambitious endeavor. We are reaching and willing to reach $3 billion to 2030. And a major part of that is water related. Not only in solving some of the basic needs, but also in upgrading the capacities in what we call nexus, which is the link between water, energy, and food. It's central for all places, and it is central for Africa. As when we see the numbers, it looks like a lot of money, but it is certainly not that much for solving the key issues. We are talking several, in some cases, 100 millions of people that are affected through the climate. And if we don't act, if we don't change the way we manage water, those issues are not going to be solved. I will get into that in a few moments. Let me now move a little bit to the Mediterranean. We are also very active in the Mediterranean, and we do have, as it is the case in Africa, several key interactions with the private sector and the public sector. We are working together with the Union for the Mediterranean in developing new ways and policies and a very ambitious agenda for solving the water issues in the Mediterranean. And we are also working with other stakeholders in several watersheds, trying to get into implementation of what we really believe in, which is IWRM, Integrated Water Resources Management. So let me close my intervention by reflecting on that. We do know what Integrated Water Resources Management is, and GWP has been a very key institution in that. But now we need to get everybody to really deploy that, to do IWRM. And this is a big challenge. So in that way, we are thinking on developing with the economy sectors of different areas. For example, in the Mediterranean, we are starting to work with the tourism industry, so that they can do nexus. We can help the tourism industry to work in a different level on how they manage water in the link to the food industry, how they deal with food in the tourism industry, and also with the energy, of course, how they solve and how they move into renewables and into sustainable energy. Water is at the core of that agenda. So one thing we are exploring and working in is to overlap IWRM, which, as I said before, we know as a concept, with the key economy sectors in different regions of the world. And I call you to think on that and to try to focus on how we can do that in your region, and also how we can upgrade that in Africa and in the Mediterranean. Let me say, to finish, that financing resilience is only beginning, and we need to have more data in order to be able to develop financial schemes. A lot of the possibilities have to do with being able to be accountable and to measure what we are achieving, and also being able to develop derivatives, develop instruments and tools that are linked to real data. So behind and below the possibility of increasing our action in financing resiliency is also the capacity for having trustable data available, open to everybody, transparent, and being able to use that to develop the financial solutions. So it is a real pleasure for me to be doing this opening, and GWP is very much willing to help all of you in this goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pablo, Mr. Chair, for sharing the insights, your insights and the commitments and the perspectives of GWP. And now it's my honor to give the floor to Ambassador Grammenos Mastrojeni, your Senior Deputy Secretary General for Energy and Climate Action at the Union for the Mediterranean. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. As he mentioned, energy and climate action. This panel will be concluded by my colleague Almotaz Abadi, who is in charge of water. I just happen to be here as the coordinator of the pavilion that we're having here, the Mediterranean Pavilion. And by the way, it's the most super duper pavilion of the whole history of COPs, so you can't miss it. I'm joking. Almotaz, my friend Almotaz, will be able to deliver to you a more precise and substantiated indications on what we are doing about water. But it is upon me to give a general outlook. And above all, I think that my mission here is to send at least 3 messages of optimism, which is quite maybe unexpected in the atmosphere that we are in. Unexpected because of the real situation. The Mediterranean is itself a climate hotspot and the point of convergence of problems all around it. Let's start from what's happening outside the Mediterranean. To the south, the Mediterranean is entangled, let us use a quantum science word, with the largest human impact crisis related to climate change, which is the desertification in the Sahel. If you see what's happening there, the band of desertification perfectly overlaps the area of concentration of hunger, conflicts, illegal trafficking, terrorist dynamics, and that's the origin of those movements, forced population movements, that are taking place above all in Africa. Nobody knows how many people are on the move, but more than 20 million. But it also looks up toward us, and it's beyond the problem of migrations that we are absolutely entangled with the tragedy that the Sahel is having to cope more and more with. Looking at the future to the east, it's again a problem of water. The worst geostrategic crisis foreseen is linked with the predicted thawing of Himalayan, Dokush, and Pamir glaciers. When they collapse, because this is what unfortunately will happen, it will be a tragedy for the mountains, but it will be a disaster for the plains. In that area, monsonic climate to the south, glaciers retain excess humidity from the rainy season and release it gradually during the dry season through a network of rivers that irrigate plains where 1.4 billion people live. Once the glaciers crumble, It is a tragedy for the mountains, but in the valleys they will have to cope with an unmanageable alternance of drought and floods. And again, it is a regional problem, but it also looks west. And in the middle of all this, the Mediterranean is the second fastest warming region in the world. There are many threatening predictions associated to this measurement, one of which is 250 million people in water scarcity. It is a rather gloomy panorama, and I know you're not interested in my personal life, but just to make a case. Until a few years ago, I was a negotiator. Now, with the pavilion, I have this observer's badge. But still, I have some friends among the negotiators, and I cross with them in the corridors, and you don't even need to talk. You exchange a look, and you understand that the message is, it's going so and so. But thanks God, reality is faster than cops. So let me share with you the 3 reasons why, against all odds, we keep fighting, and we think this thing can be solved. From the most technical up to the most political one, there are 3 things that we understood that are making our horizon maybe possible to manage. The first thing that we understood, and that is one guiding line of our action as Union for the Mediterranean, is that we have to abandon the illusion that we can substitute the ecosystem with artificial surrogates. That kind of attitude that lead you to think, oh, bees are gone, no problem. I can spread mini drones that will pollinate. Someone will tell me what kind of drone can make honey. So, thanks God we entered the age in which instead of drilling 500 meters deep wells, we decided that it's better to protect the forests that retain water. And this is one key point of our philosophy towards this problem. The second one is that something happened absolutely extraordinary. It started to surface at last COP in Glasgow. A shift of perception which is crucial. Until Glasgow, private sector felt that our struggle was important because also finance and business is made of people who have children. But basically a problem. I mean, if I have to introduce in my investment a care for the environment, society, I mean, it will be higher costs, so we'll become less competitive, so the market will kill me. That was the perception. Economic science, but also on-ground experience proved to the economic world that sustainable is not only necessary for a future, but it is also convenient. And so this is this fantastic realignment. Of course, we are struggling with interests that are still to be fine-tuned and markets that still have to open, but we are in a new environment. Business, economy, the engine of what's going on starts to be in the battle on the right side. And then there is one third thing, which is our particular pride in the Mediterranean. It's the real reason why, for the first time, we decided to have a Mediterranean pavilion. You know, the Mediterranean is not a component of this negotiation. The Mediterranean area is fractioned into 3 negotiating groups. So although we are a very exposed region, we do not exist in the negotiation. Something similar to what happened to the islands. You know, the small islands belong to different negotiating groups, but they managed to unite and send a message. We did the same. It's a message of distress. We are very exposed. But it is my last message and the one that really encourages us to be optimistic. We discovered one thing in the Mediterranean, that is that the differences that cut us apart in the past are now becoming a solution. We need each other because we are different, not because we are equal. We want to decarbonize in the European Union. We need the solar power of the South. The South wants to develop its solar power potential. It needs the markets of the North. And it is the same in water. Let me just hint to one final thing. This is the philosophy, for instance, of such a weird thing called virtual water. But yes, if we put it on solidarity, if we put it on understanding that each one should give according to its natural potential, we can make it. And on the way, almost unperceived, we will build peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this second introductory speech. And as you've seen, probably, we've been 4 musketeers in the organization of this session: IWRA, GWP, the Union for the Mediterranean, and INBO, the International Network of Basin Organizations. Et c'est donc mon plaisir maintenant de céder la parole à Monsieur Nizar Baraka, ministre de l'Équipement et de l'Eau du Royaume du Maroc, président mondial du Réseau international des organismes de bassin. Monsieur le Président, vous avez la parole.
Mesdames et Messieurs, aimable assistance, j'ai le plaisir d'assister avec vous dans le cadre de ce side event comme président du Réseau international des organismes du bassin, le RIOB, mais également comme ministre du Royaume du Maroc chargé de l'équipement et de l'eau. Je tiens à remercier les organisateurs de cette session pour le choix de cette thématique importante qui est le financement de la résilience climatique dans le domaine de l'eau en Afrique et en Méditerranée. Et je tiens à remercier également les différents intervenants pour, je dirais, les différents axes qu'ils ont eu l'occasion d'alimenter à travers leurs interventions. Comme vous le savez, le 6e rapport du groupe d'experts intergouvernemental sur l'évolution du climat, le GIEC, sur les impacts, l'adaptation et la vulnérabilité prévient que le changement climatique d'origine humaine provoque des perturbations dangereuses et généralisées, que ce soit au niveau naturel, mais aussi en termes qui affectent la vie des milliards de personnes dans le monde, malgré les différents efforts qui ont été déployés pour réduire les risques liés au changement climatique. Ce même rapport a souligné qu'aujourd'hui, ce n'est plus question de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, mais également d'adaptation. Et nous nous réjouissons que cette COP, donc organisée à Sharm el-Sheikh par l'Égypte, donne une grande importance à l'adaptation qui devrait être désormais le cœur des négociations des changements climatiques. D'après les données scientifiques, tout retard dans l'action mondiale risque de mettre en péril les efforts entrepris et menacer l'avenir des générations futures et nuire évidemment à la Terre. Avec l'augmentation du réchauffement climatique, toutes les régions du monde sont affectées par les phénomènes climatiques extrêmes, et notamment l'Afrique et la Méditerranée, et également, selon le rapport du Programme des Nations Unies pour l'environnement, sur l'écart entre les besoins et les perspectives en matière d'adaptation, publié en 2021, les besoins annuels pour l'adaptation sont désormais estimés entre 160 et 340 milliards de dollars d'ici à l'horizon 2030 et 565 milliards de dollars d'ici 2050. Les flux financiers internationaux pour l'adaptation au changement climatique dirigés vers les pays en développement sont 5 à 10 fois inférieurs aux besoins estimés et malheureusement, l'écart ne cesse de se creuser. Pour le cas de l'Afrique, nous savons tous que ce continent, très vulnérable au changement climatique, ne contribue qu'à 4% aux émissions mondiales. Pourtant, l'Afrique est considérée comme la région la plus touchée par les impacts des changements climatiques, avec une réduction de près de 34% de la croissance de la production agricole et un risque d'exposer 118 millions d'Africains parmi les plus pauvres à des sécheresses, des inondations, des chaleurs extrêmes d'ici 2030 et par conséquent un risque majeur de migration. Une étude publiée fin juin dernier par le Climate Policy Initiative, le continent africain doit mobiliser 250 milliards de dollars en moyenne par an entre 2020 et 2030 pour faire face aux effets des changements climatiques. Par ailleurs, les flux totaux de financement climatique domestiques et internationaux vers le continent n'ont mobilisé que 30 milliards de dollars en 2020, soit environ 12% de ce qui est nécessaire. Quant à la région méditerranéenne, elle a sa propre identité climatique et ses propres défis. Aujourd'hui, elle se réchauffe plus vite que la moyenne mondiale. Elle est considérée comme une région hotspot du changement climatique, selon les derniers rapports du GIEC. Et d'après ce groupe d'experts, les températures moyennes annuelles sur Terre et sur mer dans cette région sont déjà 1,5 degré supérieures à celles de l'époque pré-industrielle et elles devraient augmenter d'ici à 2100 de 0,5 à 6,5 degrés selon le scénario de lutte contre le changement climatique. Et en parfaite corrélation avec l'augmentation de la température, les précipitations risquent de diminuer davantage, jusqu'à 22% à l'horizon 2100. Les impacts du changement climatique ont de nombreuses conséquences sur les écosystèmes et sociétés en Méditerranée qui aggravent en fait les défis auxquels les pays de la région sont d'ores et déjà face. On connaît tous ces défis, le stress hydrique, on le vit fortement d'ailleurs cette année, la désertification, la perte de biodiversité, la dégradation des sols et les événements climatiques extrêmes, à savoir sécheresse, inondations, incendies de forêt, vagues de chaleur. Nous sommes tous conscients que du degré de la vulnérabilité de ces territoires et de leurs besoins énormes en financement de la résilience climatique. Néanmoins, la question qui se pose, c'est à quel niveau qu'on pourra véritablement mobiliser, je dirais, les moyens nécessaires pour faire face à ces besoins. En effet, le financement de l'adaptation au changement climatique est un sujet fondamental pour la transition climatique. Il y a eu un engagement qui a été pris depuis 2009 et surtout avec la COP 21 lors des accords de Paris pour mobiliser l'équivalent de 100 milliards de dollars pour l'adaptation de manière annuelle. Nous avons un déficit d'environ 17 milliards de dollars sur ce total aujourd'hui qu'il y a lieu de combler. Et la COP 27, en fait, vise à atteindre cet objectif, voire à aller au-delà. Et selon le rapport du PNUE, les besoins de financement en matière d'adaptation pour le secteur de l'eau, calculés à partir des contributions déterminées au niveau national et des plans nationaux d'adaptation des 26 pays en développement, représentent environ 15% des besoins totaux de ce financement relatif à l'adaptation. Mesdames et messieurs, concernant les engagements du Maroc vis-à-vis de l'accord de Paris, il y a lieu de signaler que notre pays a soumis sa nouvelle contribution déterminée nationale, sa NDC, avec une ambition revue à la hausse, fixée à 45,5% d'ici 2030, contre 42% prévus initialement. Et vu la priorité accordée par le Maroc à l'adaptation, cette CDN révisée comprend des programmes de renforcement, de résilience des secteurs les plus affectés, notamment celui de l'eau, et va devoir mobiliser 40 milliards de dollars américains pour atteindre ces objectifs. Je tiens à rappeler que le Maroc a mis en place une budgétisation sensible au climat au niveau de nos budgets pour voir notre capacité de réaliser en fait nos CDN et veiller à travers un certain nombre d'indicateurs de performance à nous assurer que cela va être réalisé. Et nous avons mis en place également une stratégie nationale de développement durable et une stratégie régionale de développement durable avec les différents présidents de région pour faire en sorte à ce que ces plans aient une véritable portée territoriale pour agir en faveur des populations. Mesdames et messieurs, le paysage mondial de la finance climatique est marqué par la multiplicité des parties prenantes qui entraîne parfois un manque de coordination, de transparence et de redevabilité et une mise en œuvre inefficace du financement de la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Et la problématique se pose encore plus quand il s'agit d'adaptation. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous travaillons avec un certain nombre de partenaires pour la mise en place d'indicateurs, de mesures et ce qu'on appelle les métriques pour l'adaptation, pour faciliter, je dirais, la mobilisation des fonds nécessaires et aussi pour mesurer l'impact de l'adaptation en matière de lutte contre les changements climatiques. Enfin, je voudrais, pour finir, considérer que le changement climatique, en fait, ne connaît pas de frontières et c'est la raison pour laquelle la stratégie d'adaptation doit être coordonnée au niveau mondial et régional. Au niveau du RIOB, nous agissons dans ce sens parce que nous considérons que les organismes de bassin peuvent jouer un rôle essentiel pour pouvoir, mettre en place des programmes d'adaptation au changement climatique et aussi contribuer à la mobilisation de financement pour pouvoir réaliser, je dirais, ces programmes. C'est aussi le cas donc, du secteur privé qui doit être également mobilisé dans la mise en œuvre de ces programmes, sans parler de la société civile qui joue un rôle essentiel en termes d'objectifs visant à changer les comportements vis-à-vis des ressources naturelles. Pour conclure, je voudrais dire que ce Side Event est une véritable occasion pour débattre ce sujet important d'échanger entre nous sur les différentes opportunités offertes pour la coopération multipartite dans cette région très vulnérable au changement climatique. Et je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre, d'avoir pris le temps de partager les projets du Royaume du Maroc ainsi que les analyses du réseau international des organismes de bassin. This is now the time for our panel. And we'll have different, four panelists, in fact. My role here will be to be a very strict timekeeper. I prefer to warn you in advance so that we can have some time for question and answers at the end of the session. And I'm very happy that we are able to start with Mrs. Judith Eno. Judith, you're the Secretary General of the International Commission of the Congo-Ubangi-Sangha Basin, SICOS. And so the question that you might try to answer to is related to the different challenges in terms of adaptation to climate change, but the design and implementation of adaptation projects. How do you address these challenges in your basin? Judith, the floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, I greet you this warm afternoon here in Sharm el-Sheikh, and I greet you, ladies and gentlemen, who have graced this occasion and have decided to listen to us share our little experiences on how we manage at our own little scale to address the issues raised by climate change and how we try to build resilience for our own little region. Yesterday morning, I happened to have participated in a water event at Ibis Room 1, in which a lot of things were said about financing or about climate change and the vagaries that climate change bring into our world today. And one presentation actually caught my attention, and this was done by one young lady who was presented as the water runner, Ina. And in her presentation, she made a loud outcry on the very feeble, not to say weak or near absence of financing in the water domain to help countries and systems and communities address the issues arising from climate change. And I do subscribe somehow into her school of thought, although with a little variation, because we, from our own perspective, we have witnessed some little support from various donor agencies that are helping us build resilience to address the issues of climate change. And you may be wondering who we are. And I think Eric very much said it. We are the International Commission for the Congo, Ubangi, and Sangha Basin based in Kinshasa. And I'll briefly share or give a bird's eye view on what we do in addressing these issues in our sub-region. Our presentation would focus around 5 very key elements, presenting what the Congo Basin is and its member countries, the context of our presentation and the work we do, our project financing processes and how we negotiate with various donor agencies, the projects we are currently implementing in Part 4, and of course, conclusion and some key messages that we want to drive across. On this slide, you would see the Congo Basin made up of 10 riparian countries, ranging from Angola through Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Congo Democratic Republic, Gabon, Tanzania, Zambia, Rwanda, Burundi, and of course, Tanzania. SICOS was created, that is the International Commission, it was created in 1999 with the sole objective of harnessing experiences and resources to promote safe navigation within the Congo Basin as a framework and a tool for improving on integration within the sub-region. Eventually, it was realized that the proper management of the basin could not be limited on only inland navigation promotion. So our mandate was extended to IWRM, and as of today, SICOS has 2 broad mandates, promotion of inland navigation and IWRM, which many people have talked about since morning. And of course, on the basis of these 2, big mandates, we have been able to come up with institutional documents and strategic planning documents that help us achieve our mission. Our major challenge is that of raising finances to implement projects, especially projects that enable us to address climate change issues. And how have we gone about or been able to raise this financing? We have adopted or put in place a negotiating scheme within our commission, and which enables us to work with development partners and financier or donor agencies to be able to do 1 or 2 projects. And our first strategy is that of proper project identification and preparation. Because we all know that for you to sell a project idea or concept across the table, you must be able to identify a vibrant and project that can bring outcomes that would address the issues you face. And then we go ahead to align our project objectives and outcomes to the interest and domains of donor agencies. For a donor to listen to you and even think of financing your project, you must be able to align it with their own strategic domain and interest. And we go forward to create synergy of action with our donor agencies. Once we have identified the donor agencies, we give them no rest. We work with them, we exchange with them, we negotiate with them. And I want to say that one of such donor agencies has always been the French Development Agency that has supported SICOS along the years, and of course the French Fund for Global Environment. And what SICOS does to give more impetus to our work is to engage our member countries. SICOS does not intend or pretend to replace the riparian states or members of the Commission. We engage them in everything we do so that there is a level of appropriation and ownership of not only the project, but eventually the project outcomes to help them capitalize and sustain the project outcomes. And of course, through this lengthy stage of negotiation, we have realized that we need to be patient, we need to be tenacious, and to stay engaged in the principles that we put across to our donor agencies. So after all of this goes on, it takes quite some time. Sometimes it takes us 3 to 4 years, not to say 5 years, negotiating with a particular donor agency. And we have presently 3 big projects that SICOS is executing in collaboration with member states to be able to adapt our uses of the water resources of the basin, not only to climate change, but to the various uses that is across the sectors and across boundaries. And the first project I want to talk about is what I just mentioned, that which is financed by the French Development Agency and the French Fund for Global Environment, which is the pilot project on IWRM and water information systems. Somebody said earlier in the morning that you cannot manage what you do not know. SICOS goes further to say you cannot manage what you do not measure. So through this project, we are trying to put in place and capitalize on a water information system that gives us up-to-date and real-time information in terms of data across the board throughout the basin on what is available at what point in time in terms of water resource management. How can such resources be mobilized and allocated for the various uses and for the various member countries? We have a support project which is funded by the EU on the regulation, facilitation, safety, and sustainability of fluvial transport within the Congo Basin. Needless to say that inland transportation within the Congo Basin remains a very important tool to promote integration and cooperation amongst the riparian countries. And there is this big project that is financed both by the EU and the AU within the continent, known as the GMS and Africa project, which is the global monitoring of the environment for security in Africa. And through these 3 projects, SICOS is accompanying its member countries on how to better adapt to climate change. And what are the major objectives of these projects? Building resilience, adapting to climate change, contributing to ameliorating inland navigation, and of course, promoting a sustainable management of natural resources within the basin. Do we have problems? Do we have issues surrounding implementing the projects? Yes, like all other institutions we have. One of them is getting the member countries appropriate the outcomes of the projects, and of course, beneficiary basin organizations like us in order to sustain the results of the projects. Another one is building and creating value-add chains around the project outcomes that we implement. And of course, we have realized that to sustain the projects, the outcomes, and to make them long-term, there is a need to improve on stakeholder capacity building. So within the premise of the three projects we are permanently executing, we try to pay special attention to these issues, especially that of raising capacity and building the capacity of national experts to carry forward the outcomes of the project when they come to an end. With this very brief presentation, I thank you very much for listening to us from the Congo Basin and for getting a little information on what we do. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Secretary General, for sharing with enthusiasm and dynamism, as always, these very strong messages. Now I would like to invite to the floor Mr. Alisher Mamajanov. You're with the Green Climate Fund. You're a climate policy and governance specialist. And so the question for you might be to elaborate on how GCF is supporting developing countries in the Mediterranean and Africa in enhancing the climate resilience through water projects. Alisher, the floor is yours. Have you got a PPT? You can stay there if you prefer, yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tardieu, and thank you very much also to IMBO and the All Four Musketeers for inviting us here. It's an honor to be on such a high-level, distinguished panel. Good afternoon, all colleagues. I will start with, if you would allow, just a very short introduction to what GCF does. Green Climate Fund was established under the convention and also, of course, serves the Paris Agreement. With the ultimate goal to promote low-emission climate-resilient development in developing countries, and by design, also GCF and its governing instrument is targeted to balance between mitigation and adaptation. So we should achieve 50-50 balance in grant equivalent terms, and we are almost there. We are now at 49-51 ratio, so we're getting there, and with a relatively short now history, but already I think reached maturity, we have already provided to developing countries from our funds 11.3 billion in funding for mitigation and adaptation measures, which attracted some additional more than 30 billion. So now our portfolio stands at more than $42 billion. Coming again to the importance of adaptation for our fund and the water especially, we have 4 result areas under mitigation and adaptation, and among those 4 for adaptation, we have a result area on health, food, and water security. So water is indeed a very important component in adaptation, and so far we have invested in 89 projects and programs, which attracted 1.3 billion of our funding and additional co-financing of about $1.5 billion. Looking, of course, now a bit more into details of what we do under the water realm of our operations. I would really like to refer you to our water security guide, which is a document, a guidance which was relatively recently published, which actually serves to guide accredited entities, and we provide financing through a big network of our accredited entities, which actually shows how we are working and what means for us a real paradigm shifting project in water security. And we, in that guide, actually propose 2 paradigm shifting pathways. One is on the demand side, so promoting water efficiency, water conservation, which includes also the water nexus, water energy food nexus. And on the other hand, also through the second paradigm shifting pathway, promoting better management of resource. So here, of course, IWRM is an important, aspect, and including also in transboundary context, because we also, in our guide, would like to promote transboundary water arrangements in the basins. That's why the topic of this discussion is very interesting to us. I won't go into many details about our projects, just maybe of course, the region that we are talking about today, Africa and the Mediterranean, is indeed also a very important and, of course, water scarce, as we already heard from the distinguished speakers today. There are really big challenges in the region. We in GCF also have a special consideration. We have priority countries for adaptations, which are LDC seats in African states, and we need to achieve a 50%. So 50% of all our adaptation money should go to these countries. And actually, I'm proud to report to you that we're doing more. About actually 2/3 of all our funding in adaptation goes to LDC seats and African states. And talking about, of course, the evolution maybe of our water projects. Of course, at the beginning, these were mostly smaller scale adaptation projects, which through, of course, public sector. And just to give you some a flavor of it, we had projects in Jordan, in northern Gaza region, also, for example, in Ethiopia, which were promoting adaptation and climate resilience of water systems. For example, in Ethiopia, we were working together with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development to promote efficient irrigation schemes, including using solar energy for water pumping. In northern Gaza, working with AFD, promoting water reuse for irrigation, and in that way also preventing further depletion of the important coastal aquifer. In Jordan, a similar also project with FAO. So, but we all, of course, understand that public money is not enough. We, as was already mentioned, we're talking about hundreds of billions, if not trillions, needed to invest in water. So what we do now, we try to attract public financing. We are capital agnostic. We have all range of financing instruments, so grants, loans, guarantees, equity, and we try to use those instruments to attract public funding. So just recent examples include our project with FMO, Climate Investor 2 project, which actually with 145 million grant invested from us will attract more than 700 million in granted equity for projects in water and sanitation. Also an example is a very recent one, Green Guarantee Company with MUFG Bank in Japan, which will, with 40 million of our initial equity, will bring more than 300 million in equity, again, to fund projects. And mostly we're talking in countries in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And of course, coming back to transboundary cooperation and having a colleague on my left from the African Development Bank, would like to give as a final remark an example of a project in the transboundary Niger Basin, where we, through African Development Bank, we are financing a big project, integrated development and adaptation project, which more than 200 million, out of which more than 60 million of our investment, which is really working in different fields, agriculture, water, to promote in a systematic way adaptation in the basin. And here the role of Niger Basin Authority, NBA, is also very important. So really would like to congratulate once again INBO for such an interesting side event, and this is a very timely discussion. Look forward to any possible questions and as a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alisher. Thank you for sharing the actions and the numbers of the GCF in the Mediterranean and in Africa. And you've also, again, demonstrated that adaptation in the field of water, of course, also touches upon agriculture and many other human activities. So since you've shown the example, I will not go, I won't do this sport. I don't need to do so much sport. Please don't tell my wife I've said that. And I'm happy to give the floor now to Oswald Chanda. Oswald, you're the director of the Water Development and Sanitation Department with the African Development Bank. And we know that the lack of project readiness is one of the most limiting factors for attracting additional financing for infrastructure development. Can you please discuss some other solutions to bridging Africa's infrastructure finance gap? Oswald, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for my presentation to quicken the... Can we load the presentation, please? Thank you. PPT. Oh, it's not here.
I don't think we have received a PPT from you. Julia told us no PPT. Okay, well, I'll see with your colleague, but
Okay,
we didn't receive.
just ask me for. Okay, just trying to get my PowerPoint presentation, and apparently it's not loaded. Okay.
Maybe can I suggest that
Okay.
we switch? Yeah, we switch the order since I'm seeing the presentation of Kishan Khoday here already on the screen. Sorry about that, Oswald, but it will give us some more time to reestablish the availability of your PPT. And so let us switch the order, and we have the pleasure to have now on floor Kishan Khoday, regional team leader for nature, climate and energy at the United Nations Development Program. So the question for you might be, of course, that UNDP has been very active at the local level, supporting access to climate finance, climate adaptation in a variety of different country contexts. And so of importance for the Med and Africa regions, what are the challenges or the opportunities that you see for accelerating results in fragile and crisis-affected countries?
Great.
Kishan, the floor is yours. Thanks.
No, thanks so much, and thanks for this great session, and hi to everyone. So on behalf of UNDP, I think that this is a very pertinent question given the region in focus, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, North Africa region in particular, but also other parts of Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, many countries that are affected by fragility and crisis of various forms, not just the climate crisis. So how do we link climate action, climate adaptation in a way that builds resilience of communities, not just on water security, but more generally? So how do we mainstream it into development and crisis recovery after the last couple of years? So as was mentioned, we have local offices in most countries in the world, including many of your countries across the Mediterranean and Africa in particular. And so we've been cooperating on the water agenda for about 55 years, I think. It's one of our core areas of business over the decades, and the connection to climate change in particular over the last 30 years in implementing the Framework Convention on Climate Change. As we know, the Middle East North Africa region is the most water scarce, food import dependent region globally. So this is a particularly relevant theme for this region that we're in at the moment. The period 2007 to 17 was among the worst drought cycles in almost 1,000 years. So it's not that the last few years have been bad or it's been a bad decade. This is like a historic, unprecedented shift that's taking place. It's, of course, exacerbating water scarcity, and there's ripple effects, of course, to food insecurity, to displacement, rural to urban displacement, of course, social cohesion, and broader trends in the region over the last decade. At UNDP, we have currently about $300 million of grants that we provide across the region, about 75 country projects, but also, of course, importantly for this session, regional projects as well, dealing with transboundary issues, regional cooperation. And to that, we use that grant assistance as a base to mobilize a further $1 billion of co-financing, of course, from the public and private sectors. So I want to give an overview of some of the initiatives that we're doing in the region, just as a snapshot of the kind of initiatives to mainstream climate action, climate adaptation, and water systems. The first is in Sudan, a very interesting project with the support of the LDC fund, almost $6 million grant from the LDC fund. And this is focused on creating a new market for weather-indexed insurance, so climate insurance, climate risk insurance, to build resilience of farmers to more frequent and severe droughts, so as a way of providing social protection for communities that are facing the climate crisis via the lens of water insecurity, and to provide a sense of resilience to communities that are being affected by this. This is involving the development of various new insurance products in the market, bringing that to the market, working with national insurance companies, building the capacity of national insurance companies, and partnering with lending institutions and local farmers associations. Another good project is in Morocco, a new project that we're launching just out of COP27. This is on local climate planning and financing, $10 million grant from the GEF and co-financing of almost more than $290 million from public and private partners. This is a flagship initiative now in Morocco to implement the NDC, specifically using this grant assistance, this technical assistance, as a way of crowding in further finance, to scale up the finance, as we've been hearing. Particularly de-risking investments, looking at green sukuks, bonds, equity investments, to look at the market-based instruments for scaling up climate resilience to low-carbon approaches, but also, of course, adaptation and water resilience in critical subnational urban settings. On the other side, in Somalia, of course, as we know, facing now one of the worst droughts in almost 50 years, famine risk. And so this is a very important initiative with the support, again, of the LDC fund to address water insecurity and famine risk, particularly climate displacement, as we've seen waves of displacement in the Horn of Africa in recent years. So this includes a focus on early warning systems, improving local water management and retention systems. Of course, where we are now in the Nile Delta, a flagship initiative with the support of our friends at the Green Climate Fund, flagship initiative to try to prevent climate displacement, with over 7 million people at risk of displacement in coming decades on the coast of Egypt. So this is looking at protecting communities, the breadbasket of Egypt, rural farmers and livelihoods that'll be affected by this. So again, putting in early warning systems, coastal zone management, including links to water resource management. As was mentioned earlier, a really important synergy between climate adaptation and climate mitigation is on solar irrigation. And in Sudan, a flagship initiative with the support of our friends from Korea to expand and scale up solar-powered irrigation systems, decentralized solar irrigation for farmers. And this is not just decentralized technology, but also at the upstream level, helping to create a national solar fund to actually scale up with the IFIs and investors these solar irrigation schemes at the larger level, at a national level. And last but not least, in Yemen, in one of the more, not exactly a Mediterranean, but very relevant to crisis contexts in the Mediterranean and in Africa, flagship initiative supported by the European Commission to close the energy gap, but also the critical water access gap that's present in Yemen, and trying to, again, use solar power for crisis-affected communities, displaced communities, to actually close the gap for things like hospitals, clinics, which, as we know, have come in under so much pressure the last couple of years, and so many people have perished. So try to energize those social services for local communities that have been displaced by conflict, and serve as a base, really, for a recovery from conflict. So I think the issue of making climate adaptation a water nexus of relevance for crisis and fragile communities is really quite an important topic for the region in focus. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Khoday, for sharing UNDP insights and also very concrete project cases, explaining that we have many different types of financing tools, in fact, that are available. And now back to you, Mr. Chanda, the floor is yours again. I can see your presentation. The question is the same as a few minutes ago, if you are always okay to address it. So this need for better climate adaptation project readiness in the different countries and local authorities.
No, thank
Mr.
you.
Chanda, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and please bear with me. I thought it would not be good to deprive you of the long preparation that went into this, but also, most importantly, to bring out some of the instruments that we have at the African Development Bank that you could access to help in preparedness for climate change adaptation. Your Excellencies present here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to begin my presentation, and I'll just very quickly try and paint a picture of what water infrastructure means in the current scenario of climate change in Africa. But I think this is very well known information to all of us, and but just to say that we're dealing with a situation where there is unpreparedness on much part of the continent. Of course, the region that we are talking about, the Mediterranean and Northern African region, this is where you find people value water truly, you know, because you can't afford to waste, you can't afford these are very arid regions, and getting water is quite expensive. So talking water security becomes quite critical, and it's much more critical than many other elements that one want to look at. So financing infrastructure, we know that's inadequate at the moment, and so we are not very prepared for what is coming at the moment. So we see that the value of the investments, if these numbers go up much, much higher, you know, depending on the country and depending on the region. And the region that we are talking about, I think in terms of benefits, it's so much higher than just $1 put in, resulting in $5.5 benefits. So we say that water buttresses most of the economic activities. Water is so critical for human life, for human development, and only in its absence, only when water is not there, do we begin to appreciate it, unfortunately, but it's not there. So overall, the neglect of water, to me, exceeds the 5% that has been put on reduction of GDP. It's far much higher than that, you know, it's far much higher than that. Now, the gaps, depending on what parameters are being used to determine what the gaps are, these are just some of the numbers that we're looking at. And depending on also what you include. Are you also including sanitation in this? But the fact is, the financing gap is huge. You know, the financing gap is huge, and therefore, we need to do something, you know. And this huge gap, largely, even when the resources are there, is due to lack of preparedness. You know, we're not ready, the institutions are not ready, the bankable projects are not there, you know, and so we're saying that how can we support, how can we enhance this situation? And we have a few project preparation facilities at the African Development Bank that we are using, and that can help in accelerating the process of financing infrastructure. Transboundary water infrastructure is particularly of interest to us. You know, yes, we do finance a lot of water infrastructure, but transboundary water infrastructure is of particular interest because of the benefits, because of the impact that it has on the regions, on the people, on peace, and so on and so forth. So we do have what we call the NEPAD Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility. As you can tell from the name, this was NEPAD's idea, and we are housing it at the African Development Bank. We're targeting preparation of projects of high quality, regional, continental infrastructure, and trying to build that partnerships around water infrastructure, and promoting programs that impact a number of countries other than targeting just one particular country. Now, a lot of other infrastructure are supported by these facilities, not just water, transport, energy, ICT. Any infrastructure that contributes to building that strong or to strengthening that partnership could be supported from this facility. Preparation of feasibility studies, preparation of other detailed studies, advisory services, capacity development. One could access these resources from the bank. And the beauty is that when this is done through the bank, we ensure that whatever products, the results that are coming off is climate smart, speaking it in the context where we are, and that makes a huge difference in introducing that. We also have what we call a project preparation facility at the bank. This is open to all member countries, and indeed it's used to accelerate project preparedness. These are resources that can be made available within a very short period to address the upstream work, the project preparation, the advisory work to ensure that the financing downstream comes in quickly. And of course, whichever support that we have, we do have the facilities and the instrument to see that we are building, we mainstream within the project climate proofing of a particular project. And this includes also looking at elements of the legal aspects, the structuring aspect of the projects. So this is a facility that is available to all the countries on the continent. Then we also have finally, the Africa Water Facility. This is the initiative of the Ministers of Water. I saw the Minister of Water for the Professor Hani Sewilan. Unfortunately, he's worked out. This is their initiative. They did see the gap in the project preparedness on the continent and came to the bank to house the Africa Water Facility. We help in mobilizing resources from development partners and put into the facility so that the member states could access resources for project preparation and some advisory services. A few pilots are also used to test out certain theories. So these are the facilities that we have. Quite often, if the project is sizable, we do combine a number of these sources of funding because they have got limitations or ceilings so that we get sizable amounts and do conclusive work on the project preparation. So thank you so very much, and sorry about the mix-up at the beginning.
Thank you very much indeed, Oswald, for sharing again the very operational tools that the African Development Bank is implementing and the numbers. So I have to congratulate all of you, dear panelists. You have been very good at keeping on track with time. So as we've imagined in the program, but what we usually are not able to do, but there is now time for questions and answers. We have around 15 minutes, so please raise your hands and you can ask your question both in English or in French, of course. So Edouard is...
Okay, my name is Dalia Sabri. I am from IWRA. Many thanks for this good session and informative. My question is, actually we heard that a lot of projects, but most of them looks like it's an intergovernmental cooperation with millions of dollars given to organizations. But is there any approaches for microfinancing for farmers or for female households? Is given from the African Bank or from any of the speakers can shed some light on this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dalia. Yeah, bigger projects, smaller projects, how can we address all types of projects? Second question, please.
My name is Harald Kunstmann. I'm a climate and water researcher. The weather insurances have been mentioned. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, on which information finally are these insurances working? Because this is very difficult information, particularly in infrastructure-weak countries with very, very few observation stations, with difficulties for improved predictions, and how you do that. I would be very much interested in that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, so important for us today. I'm Lilian Coelho from the Agrobaritech Share Water for All. I would like to thank you when you present about $1 investing in sanitation, bring $5 for the health. And then about the training programs, because you can invest in infrastructures, but when you invest in people, we need to invest in the capacity building and the training. Then it's so hard to find the funds for the training high level, because the task force, the workforce in Africa is very strong, and you need to push the leadership, the governance, the ethical. Then how could you find more answers to how can you get for women and men easier funds for training in high level? Thank you so much for your intervention.
Thank you very much for this very important question indeed about human resources and capacity and training activities. I suggest we give the floor again to our panelists for the first answers. Who would like to start? I think many of you can have elements of answers to these questions. Would like, Kishan? Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks. No, thanks for the excellent questions. I think on the first one, so usually what we do in the umbrella programs, as you said, they're kind of these big umbrella programs, and within that, actually, we have these microfinance components within that, actually. So working at the community level, it's very much subnational, actually. So working at the community level for, with SMEs, for individual farmers at the community level through the microfinance system. So that's a big part of it, actually, for UNDP. So we're very much locally oriented. And for the second question on the climate insurance, actually, so this kind of initiative, which was, I think, maybe the first in the region in terms of capacity development for climate insurance, it started maybe like 5-6 years ago, actually. So the focus of it, again, is on capacity development, local capacity development, actually, working with local insurance companies, the local ministries of relevance, such as those linked to social protection, those linked to finance, and about building the capacities to actually answer this question. So the capacities do not exist in many cases, as you're saying. So the idea is to build the capacities to be able to do that, including early warning systems. How do you then link that? What kind of analytics and metrics to be able to connect to the idea of having insurance schemes and paybacks? So it's very much of a capacity development effort, including all the analytics and tools, instruments to be able to, quantify and, so it's about bringing in the best practices globally from this kind of weather index insurance and having it fit into a local context like that. So it's not about necessarily bringing in multinational insurance companies or something only, but in this case, we're working with the local insurance companies. And definitely agree with you on the last question. In terms of capacity development, I think definitely for UNDP at least, what we're doing is we're working with local think tanks, universities, NGOs across the region in terms of capacity development. Progressively, of course, it's not hardly a new topic, the water, so it's been over decades of capacity development, and at least in the MENA region, there's quite good capacities on water in various NGOs, think tanks, and some intergovernmental organizations, regional intergovernmental bodies. So we provide capacity development support, training, connect them to our global water programming through a global water partnership connection and other global partnerships.
Thank you very much. Who wants to take over? Yeah, please. GWP.
Only a couple of comments regarding capacity development. I would like to mention our toolbox. So Global Water Partnership has, and you can visit that in our webpage, toolbox, which has been renovated, and there are many tools there that can be used. And the idea is we do have already a community, and to enlarge a community, so that there is possibility of sharing experiences and sharing knowledge. So the toolbox of GWP is a living site, and very much with that view that you were mentioning. And regarding the data, I think what they call attribution, which is a way of linking climate change with the real impacts, is a link that we should focus in. And for that, from Global Water Partnership, we are also considering and willing to work on how to help on the idea, and together with WMO as well, of having the proper information for making the attribution. If you are not able to link loss and damages with the different climate situations, then it's again very difficult to upscale the capacity of financing resilience and adaptation. So it is a topic of our interest, and we are very much looking forward to try to work together with others for getting IWRM to play a role in how we can get the data and also how we can assess loss and damages.
Thank you very much. Arisher, please? No? Mr. Chanda first, and then
yes,
Mr. Mamajadov. Thanks.
Some very direct questions. Let me make a quick comment first on the capacity building. We do have in all our interventions inclusion or activities related to capacity development. Now, the way we operate in an area or in a country where we are implementing these projects, we look out for partners that can bring in this expertise. And so during the identification of projects, we do look out what capacities are there on the ground. And we don't have the luxury of capacity development agencies on the ground, so sometimes it can be quite tricky. We have to bring in people from other places to do that. So, but we try to mainstream it. It's very difficult to find a standalone project just for capacity development. For water, it's very difficult to find that. Now, the two other questions, which are in the same line, basically on how do you approach, how do you access resources from the African Development Bank to assist in project preparation. Now, of the three instruments that I mentioned, the last one, the Africa Water Facility, is available to any organization that is registered in Africa. Any water organization that is working in Africa. Now, a few times we have made calls for proposals, and any organization that is working in the water sector that sees that they can respond to the call are free to do that, and it's on merit. If the proposal is good and meets the criteria that is set out, it will be financed. Now, I must hasten to mention that it may not be in the year that you have applied. Normally, we carry on these proposals for 3 to 4 years, and to roll them out due to limited capacities. However, that is the window that is out there, open and available to any water organization that is registered in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Arisha Mamajadov.
Yeah, I'll try to be very, very quick. So on this access of, let's say, local organizations, just to echo Kishan, our UNDP colleague, that indeed, that's also, we operate similarly. So we have accredited entities through which we channel larger investment, but they, on their part, they actually channel the money through small farmers, through local organizations. That depends on the design of each project and program. So this is that. So it doesn't mean that the project is big, that small organizations, local organizations cannot benefit from GCF funding. Coming to the question on capacity building, a very good question. Just to say that we in GCF have what we call a readiness preparatory support program, a readiness and preparatory support program, or in short, readiness program, which provides actually also support for capacity building. It also provides support, for example, for the national adaptation planning activities like NAPs, but can also go down into sectoral planning. So, for example, water sector planning, adaptation planning. And as part of this, basically how it works, so for NAP and adaptation planning, we have 3 million for each country. Overall, we have 1 million each year for each country, which is renewable. So basically, countries, our national designated authorities, our national focal points, they decide how they're going to use this 1 million. So it can be including also for water sector, but in the, of course, climate change and adaptation to climate change through that lens. Not just technical water training, it has to go through the climate change lens, right? So it's possible. Again, it's countries, these are countries who decide what they want to do. On climate information for insurance, parametric insurance and weather insurance, very good also point. Again, not something that we necessarily do, but one of the recent developments that I'm also aware of is there are companies, now private companies, private insurers that go into markets of developing countries, insuring also small farmers. So how do they get information? So there are actually data sources, there are like open source websites which gather information, climate information from the whole world, and actually you can buy a very tiny, so just for that plot or that area, instead of buying huge data sets, you buy only the information that is you are interested in, right? Temperature, precipitation, and so on, so that you can design an insurance product for that farmer. So you can calculate premium based on the information that you receive specifically for that area. And of course, blockchain information and blockchain technologies play a big role here because there's a very small contract. So to reduce transaction costs, blockchain is used. So this is something, I think, the future of this weather and parametric insurance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alisha. Monsieur le Ministre Baraka.
Oui. Well, I would like also to thank you, and we'll talk about two important things. First of all, about insurance. We have in Morocco a multi-service climate insurance for farmers. It's very important because we have now around more than 1 million hectares having this insurance, and the government of Morocco gives subsidies for the farmers, can go until 90% can be given as subsidies for the little farmers to have this insurance, and it works very well. This year we had a very big drought, and thanks to this insurance, a lot of people have the opportunity to have revenue. Second important thing is about what you said about how to develop and how the capacities and capabilities of people. I would like to talk about one very important initiative, and we have the help of a lot of organizations here. It's about the AAA initiative, and it's about adaptation of agriculture for Africa. And on this initiative, we do three important things. First of all, of course, there is a real goal to adapt the agriculture to the climate change. And the second important thing, we give real training for the farmers to change their way to do agriculture. And third important thing, we organize them as cooperative, then we can help themselves and it's more easier. And third and fourth important thing, we give treatment for the land, and we give also the best fertilizer they need for agriculture and to develop and to have better productivity, then better revenues. I think this initiative, we are more than 20 countries involved on it, and it's very important. And I think then for capacity building can be very, very helpful to really make the change to face climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Baraka. And the last word for this panel will be to Mrs. Secretary General. Dear Judith.
Thank you very much, Eric. I just want to throw in a little light on the capacity building issue. Yes, we at SICOS, we do not have finances to roll out an entire program for capacity building. But what we do is that within the framework of each project, we have a component for human capital development. And within the GMS and Africa project, I'm happy to inform you that we have a target of empowering 30% of women in Earth observation sciences. And so I even push the bar a little further and say, where we have equal competencies between a man and a woman, I'll choose the woman for training and human capacity building. So we have windows for capacity building to improve on informed decision-making by leaders in our member countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are at the end of this panel, and before I hand over to Al-Mota Zabadi for the conclusion, I would like you to give another round of applause to our great panelists. Thank you very much for your messages and the dialogue with the audience. And now over to you, Al-Mota Zabadi from the Union for the Mediterranean, for the conclusion, difficult task of this session. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I would like to apologize because I am not at my office now. I am heading to Malta to close another important project for mitigation in the water sector. But allow me to thank you, all of us, Union for the Mediterranean, joined forces with the International Water Association and INBO and the Office of International Water to tackle this important issue, how to link the vertical regions, Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa, and the most pressing element, which is the water crisis due to the climate emergency. As said by many of our panelists and the speakers today, that scientific statistics have been mentioned many times in these days. Climate conference started at the Mediterranean region warm 20% faster than the rest of the world. 15% less water is expected in another 20 years to come. We have 250 million people in the Mediterranean and North Africa are suffering from the water stress, and they consider water poor. The climate emergency in our region, Africa, Mediterranean, and part of Europe, is now telling us the story that we need to invest in the water sector if we wanted to cope with the desertification elements related to drought and also flood. We have to look at the wise adaptation mechanism and to link the water portfolios and the planning at regional, sub-regional, and national level for all these amount of money allocated within the climate funding from GCF, GEF, and many other institutions. There are many numbers, many investment gap have been mentioned. It is the time to stress that the region need investment, a significant amount of investment in the water sector, and to
Okay, since that we've lost our, so a few advertising. That's what I have to do in this moment. Maybe we will have Al-Montaz back. I'm sure most of you are also interested in nature-based solutions for water and climate security. Yes, you are. So be back here in this very same room today at 4:40 p.m. and we will have a very high-level session dedicated to nature-based solutions for climate, for water and climate security. And so I suggest we close the session here since we are on time. We'll have a family picture, and thank you very much again to you, the audience, and to our interpreters. Thank you. Great session.